The unexpected exit. The vote wasn't even close. Captain Elena Vasquez watched the holographic display flicker with the final tally as she stood in the communications bay of the research vessel Endeavour. 347 votes for humanity's expulsion from the Galactic Stellar Council. Only 12 against. The rest abstained, which in galactic politics was the same as agreement. The Xanthari ambassador's voice crackled through the transmission, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he delivered what he probably thought was a diplomatic farewell. The decision has been reached through careful deliberation. Humanity's unpredictable nature has proven incompatible with our pursuit of universal harmony. Elena's second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander James Chen, stood beside her with his arms crossed. His jaw was tight, but his voice remained level. Unpredictable nature. That's rich coming from a species that declares war based on the color of their morning meal, the Xanthari continued, oblivious to the irony. You have 72 standard hours to vacate all shared facilities, research stations, and collaborative ventures. The Council appreciates humanity's contributions during our brief association. Brief association. 43 years of shared space. 43 years of humans fixing problems that others couldn't solve, bridging communication gaps that had existed for centuries, and developing technologies that the harmonious species had deemed impossible. Brief. Elena reached forward and terminated the connection without ceremony. The silence that followed felt heavier than the vacuum outside their hull. Captain? Chen's voice carried a question he didn't want to ask. Signal all human vessels and installations, Elena said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. Emergency Protocol 7. Chen's eyes widened. Protocol 7 wasn't a distress call or a call to arms. It was something else entirely, something they'd hoped never to use. Captain, are you sure? Once we implement 7, there's no going back. Elena turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of the ship's systems. James, they want us gone. Let's give them exactly what they asked for. Within hours, the response to Protocol 7 began rippling across human space like a stone dropped in still water. On Kepler Station, Chief Engineer Maria Santos received the coded message while she was elbow-deep in the station's main fusion reactor. The alien engineers had been trying to fix a resonance problem for 3 weeks. Maria had solved it in 4 hours, but she'd been letting them think they were making progress. She pulled her hands out of the reactor housing, wiped them clean, and walked away. The alien engineers barely looked up as she left. They'd figure out soon enough that the reactor would start showing critical errors within 6 hours without her constant micro-adjustments. On the mining world of Series 7, Dr. David Kim was in the middle of explaining quantum crystallization to a group of Vorthak scientists when his wrist communicator chimed with the Protocol 7 signal. He stopped mid-sentence, gathered his equipment, and headed for the door. Dr. Kim, where are you going? The lead Vorthak scientist's tentacles writhed with confusion. We haven't finished the procedure. You're right, David said without turning around. You haven't. Good luck with that. The door sealed behind him, leaving the Vorthak scientists staring at a half-completed experiment that would take them months to understand, if they ever could. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds and hundreds of stations. Human, doctors left their patients in the capable hands of alien colleagues, who suddenly realized they didn't understand half the procedures they'd been observing. Human technicians completed their shifts and simply didn't return the next day. Human. Researchers submitted their final reports and departed without fanfare. It wasn't dramatic. There were no speeches about injustice or betrayals. No threats or promises of revenge. Humans simply did what they'd been asked to do. They left. The efficiency was unsettling. Within 60 hours, human presence in shared space had diminished by 90%. The remaining 10% were completing critical shutdown procedures for systems that only they understood. Ambassador Kryn of the Hegemony Council received the reports with growing unease. She'd voted for humanity's expulsion along with the majority, but she hadn't expected this. She'd expected protests, negotiations, perhaps even legal challenges. Not this surgical removal of an entire species from galactic society. They're not even arguing, she told her aide, a young Xanthari named Voss. "They're just leaving." "Isn't that what we wanted?" Voss asked, his confusion evident in the way his tentacles curled. Kryn wasn't sure how to answer that. She'd expected humans to fight for their place in the galaxy. Their silence was somehow more disturbing than any outraged response would have been. On the Endeavor, Elena stood in her ready room, reviewing the final evacuation reports. The speed of the withdrawal had impressed even her. Humans had a reputation for being chaotic and unpredictable, but when they wanted to be organized, they could move with military precision. Chen entered without knocking, something he only did when he had urgent news. "Captain, we're getting some interesting intercepts from Nexus Prime." Nexus Prime was the galaxy's primary communications hub, a massive space station that coordinated data flow between thousands of worlds. It was also where humanity had quietly installed some of their most advanced technological innovations. "What kind of interesting?" Elena asked. "Their primary data routing system is starting to hiccup. Nothing major yet, just small delays and occasional packet loss, but it's getting worse." Elena nodded. She'd expected this. The routing system was based on human-designed algorithms that required constant fine-tuning. The alien technicians understood the basic principles, but they'd never learned to maintain the complex predictive models that kept traffic flowing smoothly. How long before complete failure? Based on the degradation pattern? Maybe 2 weeks. Could be sooner if they try to fix it themselves. Elena almost smiled at that. Alien engineers had a tendency to over-engineer solutions to problems they didn't fully understand. Their attempts to repair the system would likely accelerate its failure. Any word from the other sectors? Chen consulted his tablet. Manufacturing output is down 8% across the board. Medical facilities are reporting increased patient waiting times. The Vorthak Mining Consortium is asking for emergency technical support. And there are reports of complete communication blackouts in the Outer Rim. Blackouts? Seems like some of the deep space relay stations have gone offline, the ones that were primarily maintained by human crews. Elena leaned back in her chair. The Outer Rim was where new civilizations made first contact with galactic society. Those relay stations were crucial for maintaining contact with emerging worlds. Without them, entire sectors would be cut off from the galactic community. "Captain," Chen said, his voice careful, "are we really going to let them struggle?" It was a fair question. Humans had a natural tendency to help, to fix problems, to offer solutions. Walking away from suffering went against their instincts. But Elena had studied the political patterns of the Galactic Council for years. She understood that sometimes the only way to prove value was to demonstrate absence. "James, they made their choice. They decided they didn't need us. Let them prove they were right. And if they can't?" Elena's expression was unreadable. Then maybe they'll reconsider what unpredictable really means. The reports continued to arrive over the following days. The Xanthari agricultural stations were experiencing crop failures after their automated systems malfunctioned. The hegemony's newest starships were showing structural stress fractures that their engineers couldn't diagnose. Research facilities across 3 sectors had ground to a halt as experiments that had been running smoothly for years suddenly began producing inconsistent results. Each failure was small by itself. A communication delay here, a technical glitch there, a research project stalled. But collectively they painted a picture that was becoming impossible to ignore. The galaxy was discovering that humans had been more than just participants in galactic civilization. They had been its backbone, its troubleshooters, its bridge between incompatible systems and ideologies. Their unpredictable nature hadn't been chaos. It had been adaptation, flexibility, and innovation. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Endeavor as it drifted in the space between stars, officially in no one's territory. Around her, dozens of other human vessels maintained similar positions, waiting. They'd received word that emergency sessions were being called on multiple worlds. The word crisis was appearing in diplomatic communications with increasing frequency. "Captain," Chen's voice came over the ship's communication system. "We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting a meeting." Elena didn't move from the viewport. Outside, the stars looked the same as they always had. Constant, eternal, indifferent to the petty concerns of the species that traveled between them. "Tell them we'll consider it," she said finally. "Consider it? We're unpredictable, remember? Let them wait." For the first time in days, Elena allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just adapt to chaos. When necessary, they could create it too. And sometimes a little chaos was exactly what an overly rigid system needed. The Galactic Awakening. 3 weeks after the humans disappeared, Ambassador Kryn found herself standing in the emergency session hall of the Galactic Council, surrounded by the nervous chatter of her colleagues. The pristine chamber, with its crystalline walls and floating holographic displays, had never felt so chaotic. Representatives from dozens of species filled the space, their various forms of agitation creating a symphony of distress that the translation systems could barely keep up with. The reports were getting worse by the hour. What had started as minor inconveniences had escalated into full-scale system failures across multiple sectors. The carefully maintained harmony of galactic civilization was unraveling at a pace that shocked even the most pessimistic observers. Premier Zix of the Vorthak Consortium was the first to speak, his tentacles writhing with barely contained panic. "The mining operations on 17 worlds have ceased production. Our extraction algorithms have failed completely. We're looking at supply shortages that could last for cycles." Councillor Thane, representing the Silicon Valley Collective, added his mechanical voice to the growing chorus of problems. "Manufacturing efficiency has dropped 42%. Quality control protocols are producing inconsistent results. Our production lines are grinding to a halt." Kryn felt a chill run through her scaled hide. She'd voted for humanity's expulsion, convinced that their chaotic nature was disrupting the natural order. Now that same chaos seemed to be consuming everything they'd left behind. The holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing a galaxy-wide status report that painted the crisis in stark, undeniable colors. Red zones indicated critical failures, yellow showed declining systems, and green represented stable operations. 3 weeks ago, the map had been predominantly green with scattered yellow patches. Now red dominated vast swaths of space with yellow zones spreading like an infection. High Coordinator Vex, the ancient Zenthari who presided over the council, raised his 4 arms for silence. His voice, usually calm and measured, carried an undertone of urgency that sent ripples of unease through the assembly. "We are facing an unprecedented crisis," he began, his 4 eyes scanning the gathered representatives. "What we initially attributed to coincidental system failures now appears to be directly connected to humanity's departure from our shared spaces." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Councillor Thane's optical sensors focused intently on the High Coordinator. "Surely you're not suggesting that a single species could be responsible for such widespread disruption?" "Not disruption," Vex replied carefully. "Maintenance. Our investigation teams have discovered that humans were integral to the operation of systems we didn't even realize they had access to. The truth was more shocking than anyone had anticipated. Over 4 decades of collaboration, humans had quietly integrated themselves into the fundamental infrastructure of galactic civilization. They hadn't just participated in shared projects. They had become the glue that held incompatible systems together. Dr. Yan, the hegemony's chief science officer, stood to address the assembly. Her normally composed demeanor showed cracks of strain. "Our research facilities are reporting complete breakdowns in experimental protocols. Projects that have been running successfully for years are now producing random results. We've discovered that human technicians were making thousands of micro-adjustments daily, compensations that our own scientists never recognized as necessary." The revelations continued to pour in. The Nexus Prime Communication Hub, the galaxy's primary data routing center, was operating at 30% capacity. Without human-designed adaptive algorithms, the system couldn't handle the complex traffic patterns that connected thousands of worlds. Message delays that had once been measured in seconds now stretched into hours. Medical facilities across 17 sectors were reporting critical shortages as their diagnostic equipment began producing unreliable results. Human doctors and technicians had been the primary troubleshooters for complex medical systems, often identifying and correcting problems before they became apparent to their alien colleagues. The agricultural stations that fed billions of beings were experiencing crop failures as their automated systems lost synchronization with natural biological cycles. Human farmers had developed intuitive understanding of these systems, making adjustments that seemed random to other species, but were actually responses to subtle environmental changes. Perhaps most critically, the deep space relay stations that maintained contact with emerging civilizations had gone completely dark. Entire sectors of space were now cut off from galactic communication, leaving new species stranded without the guidance they needed to join the galactic community. Ambassador, Kryn listened to each report with growing horror. The humans hadn't been chaotic disruptors. They had been the chaos controllers, the ones who made order possible in a galaxy full of incompatible systems and conflicting approaches. Premier Zik spoke again, his voice tight with desperation. "We need to find them. Surely they can be persuaded to return. We could offer them better terms, improved status within the Council." High Coordinator Vex's expression was grim. "That assumes they want to be found. Our attempts to locate human vessels have been unsuccessful. They appear to have withdrawn to areas beyond our current scanning capabilities." The truth was more unsettling than simple withdrawal. Human ships had vanished from all known space, routes, and gathering points. It was as if an entire species had simply stepped outside the boundaries of galactic civilization and pulled the door closed behind them. Dr. Yan activated a holographic display showing the Outer Rim territories. "We've detected unusual energy signatures in several uninhabited systems, patterns that don't match any known technology in our databases." Counselor Thane's optical sensors brightened with interest. "New technology? Possibly. Or existing technology. Being used in ways we haven't seen before. The signatures are consistent across multiple locations, suggesting coordinated activity. The implications hung in the air like a storm cloud. If humans were developing new technologies in isolation, they might emerge from their self-imposed exile more advanced than when they'd left. The species that had been dismissed as chaotic troublemakers might return as something far more formidable. Meanwhile, in a star system that didn't appear on any galactic charts, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of what had once been a research station and was now something entirely different. The facility, hidden in the asteroid belt of an unnamed system, buzzed with activity as human engineers and scientists worked on projects that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to Elena's second-in-command, approached with a tablet full of data. Her excitement was barely contained. "The quantum resonance experiments are exceeding all projections. We're achieving efficiency rates that are 40% higher than anything we managed in shared facilities." Elena studied the data with satisfaction. Without the need to explain their work to alien oversight committees or adapt their methods to accommodate other species' limitations, human researchers were making breakthrough discoveries at an unprecedented pace. "What about the infrastructure projects?" Elena asked. "Ahead of schedule. The new communication network should be online within 6 weeks, independent of galactic systems, using our own protocols and security measures." Elena nodded. The human exodus hadn't been a retreat. It had been a regrouping, freed from the constraints of galactic bureaucracy and the need to make their innovations compatible with alien systems. Human ingenuity was flourishing. Commander James Chen entered the command center with his own set of reports. "Captain, we're receiving increasing numbers of distress signals from galactic space. System failures, infrastructure collapses, communication breakdowns. Any direct attempts to contact us?" "Several. The Galactic Council has been broadcasting on all frequencies requesting dialogue. Some of the messages are getting quite desperate." Elena walked to the observation window that looked out over the bustling activity of the hidden facility. Dozens of human ships moved between construction platforms, bringing resources and personnel from other hidden installations scattered throughout uncharted space. "How many of our facilities are operational now?" 17 major installations, 43 smaller research outposts, and 12 manufacturing centers. We're effectively operating as an independent civilization. Elena considered this. In just 3 weeks, humanity had accomplished something remarkable. They had built the foundation of their own society, separate from and independent of the galactic community that had rejected them. "Captain," Sarah Chen interjected, "there's something else. We've been monitoring galactic communications and we're seeing some interesting developments." She activated a holographic display showing intercepted transmissions from various alien governments. The content was revealing. Species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence were now forming emergency alliances to deal with infrastructure failures. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were being restructured as supply chains collapsed. "They're learning to work together," Elena observed. "More than that," Sarah replied. "They're starting to understand how interconnected their systems really were. The Vorthak are sharing mining technology with the Zenthari. The hegemony is providing manufacturing assistance to species they've historically viewed as competitors." Elena smiled at that. Perhaps the most valuable lesson humans could teach the galaxy wasn't how to maintain their systems, but how to cooperate in a crisis. The alien species were being forced to develop the kind of flexible, adaptive thinking that humans had always taken for granted. "Captain," James said carefully, "the question is, what do we do when they come looking for us? And they will come looking." Elena turned from the window to face her officers. "When they find us, we'll be ready. But we won't be the same humans who left galactic space 3 weeks ago. We'll be something new." Back in the Galactic Council chambers, the emergency session was reaching its conclusion. The assembled representatives had spent hours documenting the scope of the crisis and attempting to develop solutions. The results were not encouraging. High Coordinator Vex addressed the assembly one final time. "It is clear that we have made a significant error in judgment. Humanity's contributions to our civilization were far greater than we understood. The question now is whether we can repair the damage we have caused." Ambassador Kryn stood to speak, her voice heavy with the weight of her decision weeks earlier. "With respect, High Coordinator, I believe the question is whether they will allow us to repair the damage. We expelled them from our society. We told them they were unwelcome. Why should they help us now?" The chamber fell silent as the full implications of their situation settled over the assembled representatives. They had rejected humanity based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what chaos and order really meant. Now they were discovering that true chaos wasn't the presence of unpredictable elements, but the absence of those who could manage unpredictability. Dr. Yan activated her communication console and began composing a message on all frequencies, directed toward the empty spaces where human ships had once traveled. "To our former human colleagues," she began, her voice carrying across the galaxy's communication networks, "we acknowledge our error. We have learned that harmony is not the absence of discord, but the ability to create music from different notes. We formally request dialogue." The message traveled through space at light speed, carrying with it the hopes and fears of dozens of species. But in the hidden installations where humanity was building something new, the response was not what the galaxy expected. Elena Vasquez listened to the message in her command center, surrounded by the evidence of human achievement and innovation. When it finished, she turned to her officers with the expression that was both determined and sad. "Record a response," she said simply. The message she sent back was brief, polite, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Your request for dialogue has been received and will be considered. When humanity is ready to rejoin galactic civilization, we will do so on our own terms. Until then, we have work to do." The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most profound changes happen in the quiet spaces between worlds, where those who were underestimated finally have the freedom to show what they're truly capable of becoming.